I'm adapting my grandma's chocolate zucchini cake to be grain-free. Hey everybody, I'm excited to share this recipe with you today for a couple of reasons. One, it's the first non-SCD, modified SCD, beyond SCD recipe I've shared on this channel on a video. So it's gonna have, it only has one non-SCD ingredient, that's unsweetened cocoa. So for those of you who are grain-free, gluten-free, or GAPS diet, it's perfect. Two, it's my grandma's recipe and I'm just excited to make it because it's an old family recipe. I used to have it all the time growing up. So it's really fun to be able to make this in a way that I can have it since I eat chocolate. So that's how we're gonna do it today. I have her original recipe card here. It says it's the recipe she always made, but it says Alice's chocolate zucchini cake, and Alice was her cousin, who I didn't know, but this is a family recipe that everybody used. So it's cool to go back and just share in that family history and remember it and share it with others. So that is what I'm going to do today. So I've got my ingredients here behind me, so let's get started. Here's my grain-free ingredients. So we've got 2 zucchini there. That should be enough. I got some more if I need it, but it's supposed to end up with about 2 cups. We got a half of a cup of yogurt. That replaces the milk that was in the original recipe. I've got 5 tablespoons of butter and 2 tablespoons of oil. But that replaces, in the original recipe, there's actually a half a cup of butter and a half a cup of oil, which is a lot. We don't need to have, even though I'm making the same size cake, we don't need to have as much because almond flour has natural oil. And that's why if you've baked with almond flour and it's gotten kind of like sweaty and way too moist, it might be because you have too much oil in there, and it's going to get that way a little bit anyway. But if you're trying to adapt a recipe, that is one important thing to take into consideration. And I didn't want to go 1-to-1 because of the oil and the almonds. I felt like I wanted to cut back on the actual oil. So that's avocado oil. I don't know if that's what I said at first. And then the butter. You could use all butter if you'd like. You could also use palm shortening if you like, if you don't want to use oil. I just wanted to kind of keep it a little more true to the original recipe, which had a combination of butter and oil in it. 2 eggs, teaspoon of vanilla, a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar, which you could also use lemon juice instead. You just need that acid in there a little bit. A half a cup of honey, and then in the back we've got our 2.5 cups of almond flour, 3 tablespoons of coconut flour. That's important. Also, it will kind of help take out some of that moisture because coconut flour absorbs a lot of moisture. I've got my spices and baking soda mixture. So there is a half a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of baking soda, half a teaspoon of cinnamon, and a half a teaspoon of cloves. And then there's a half a cup of chocolate chips. These are date sweetened. If you need to know my source for those, just let me know. These ones are actually not made anymore. That's why they look they're a little bit white, but they still taste fine. I've just been storing them for a while because that company that made them no longer does it. So I was holding on to them, but I'm going to use them now. And then I've got my 4th cup of unsweetened cocoa powder. So like I said, you could use any chip that you're comfortable with, or you could even use an unsweetened one, but those ones are date sweetened. And as you can see, she wrote that recipe card in cursive, which was actually kind of hard to read now. I'm so surprised that how hard it can be to read something when you haven't been looking at it in a long time, but I figured it all out and adapted it. And one other quick note, I've got my oven preheated to 325. To get started, we're gonna start by putting in our wet ingredients. So that is my yogurt. So I whisked it ahead of time. That's why it's a little more liquidy. That helps it get more liquidy, which is what we want for a recipe, but it also helps keep the yogurt from separating. Even as a baked thing, it could still separate a little bit as it's cooking, but whisking it keeps that from happening. My 2 eggs. The eggs are at room temperature, and so is actually my almond flour. I don't always remember to do that, but having the room temperature eggs and almond flour helps keep it helps everything mix up a little better, and it keeps a more consistent temperature. If everything is cold, it'll kind of seize up and make lumps. So that was why we tried to remember to do a room temperature on our eggs and almond flour. So my butter softened. I just had it at room temperature. It's very warm. It's the middle of summer. And so everything softens up pretty easily, but if you need to, you could just soften it a little bit using your microwave, but just don't melt it. My avocado oil, apple cider vinegar, my vanilla, and the honey. Now I'm just going to cream this all together. This is how I'm going to have this at the moment. You can see there's little chunks of butter in there. That's totally fine. It doesn't cream the same as it would with sugar. So that's why we have this. It's creamed with liquid. So of course it's going to kind of firm up a little bit, but that's totally fine. We'll get it mixed again once we get our dry ingredients ready. So I've got my almond flour, coconut flour, my spices and baking soda, and my cocoa powder. And we're just going to stir to combine. Now I'm going to add my wet ingredients in with my dry. I'm actually going to do this while I am mixing it on low speed. All right, so that is thoroughly mixed. It's a little thicker than a usual cake batter, and that is okay because the zucchini, which we haven't put in yet, and the almond flour will release moisture. So we don't want to get this too thin ahead of time. So we're just going to have to spread it out in our pan once we're ready. All right, we're ready to tackle the zucchini. I'm just going to cut the ends off. And then give these a rough chop just to make them smaller for my processor. So you might be wondering, why am I chopping this? One thing that was very clear in the recipe was not to grate the zucchini, to use finely chopped zucchini. And there was a special note about it and everything. So the best I could tell from that note, or from kind of thinking about it and maybe doing a little research on it, was that grated zucchini will release even more moisture, and the moisture could pool at the bottom of the cake. So theoretically, the chopped zucchini will more evenly distribute throughout the cake and release less moisture, so it won't get soggy. So that is what I'm gonna do. I've got about half of it in my little mini chopper, so I'm just gonna see what we get here. All right, so I think there's get this one big piece out of here. Don't want a big piece in there. All right, let's get this into the measurer. So that gave me about a cup of the chopped. It's probably a little more finely chopped than it, obviously, when they used a knife. I know my grandma used a food processor once she had one. So I'm going to keep doing that. Give me about half, and I used about half, so this should be about right. It did leave a couple of big pieces that I pulled out. So I'm going to chop these up a little bit more before I put them in. If you use a full-size food processor, you probably won't have this happen. But it wasn't enough that I wanted to get out the big machine. So we'll just chop these into smaller pieces, and we'll pull out any big pieces next time. Okay, round 2. I overfilled it. In my haste to get things done faster, I put way too much in. So let me pull out these pieces and we'll do a round 3. Okay, cancel round 3. I got 2 cups here, so that was about 1.5 of medium zucchini. So I'll just have to find another use for my leftovers there. I'm gonna just get this stirred into the batter so you can see there's a lot of zucchini. So you can see how much moisture will add with the zucchini. Even in the chopped form, it'll still release some moisture. So we're gonna stir that in. So this is truly a zucchini cake because there's a lot of zucchini in it. But zucchini makes a very moist chocolate cake. It blends very nicely. If you've never had it before, it blends very nicely with the chocolate and the spices that I added. There we go. So we got it nice and stirred in there. All right, I'm gonna get this into the pan. Don't worry, I have not forgotten my chocolate chips. Those are coming next. Just gonna get this into the pan first. So I can see some little lumps of zucchini. You can stir that around a little bit more. I mean, I will, but if you're doing it, you can stir that around a little bit more. All right, so we're gonna spread that out. Kind of give it a little more of a stir. Spread that zucchini. Make sure that zucchini is spread out. And okay, so there we go. Get it to spread out as evenly as you can. And finally, our chips. So we put the chips just right on top. So we never frosted this cake. We just had the chocolate chips on top. Now, I suppose you could stir the chips in and frost it if you wanted, but we always just had the chips right on top. Just gonna spread them out a little bit more so we can push them in a little bit, but they're gonna create like a nice chocolatey top layer. All right, there we go. All right, so finally ready for the oven. I've got the oven at 325, like I mentioned earlier, so we're gonna bake it for 45 to 50 minutes. All right, the cake is in the oven. It's going to bake for 45 to 50 minutes. So I'll see you in about an hour and we'll see if it's done. Here's our cake just out of the oven after 45 minutes at 325. And I'm thinking it's done. It feels firm. So I'm just going to test it with a toothpick here. And that's clean. So I'm just going to let it rest here and cool down to room temperature before we cut into it. So see you soon. This is a room temperature, so let us see how it is. Definitely very soft. Oh, kind of breaking apart. Okay. Well, that did not hold together quite as I wanted. I put it back together. So let me see if I can get another piece out whole. It came out a little bit soft, a little bit crumbly. I'm thinking if I refrigerate it, it's still a little warm too. I'm thinking if I refrigerate it, it should form up pretty well. It's not totally falling apart. It's just a little crumbly. So, but let's taste it because that's the important part. Yeah, so that is good. It's got a chocolatey taste. It's not super deep chocolate. It's a light chocolate taste that blends well with the zucchini, and then it's got those spices in there that really complement it. The texture is really nice. Kind of almost like it's kind of like a quick breadish cake because it has the zucchini. Definitely more cake-like though. The chocolate chips give it that extra burst of chocolate flavor and the gooiness of a chocolate chip. So definitely tastes great. I just think it needs a little more time to firm up in the refrigerator. I think if I can remember right, we did serve it cold usually. So I can't quite remember, but out of the oven, it's going to be a little crumbly, but definitely tastes great. And you get that warm, cakey feeling from the cake. Let's try it again. Yeah, it's still got a nice, moist, cakey texture. It's just falling apart a little bit more than I was hoping, but still definitely tastes great. Happy I made it. Tastes like my grandmother's. So thumbs up for me, and I'll probably do it again. Have you made a chocolate zucchini cake, or have you adapted any of your family recipes? I'd love to hear about it. Let me know in the comments.